Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. We're going to continue forward to learn about what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is a teaching that's going to dive into the natural law of Kamma, where in reality, everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. Now we're going to dive in and talk about this natural law directly itself. So even when we learn the Eightfold Path or the 5 precepts or even meditation training and all these other things that we're learning, you're learning about the natural law of Kamma, but now we're going to go in and talk about this natural law itself directly. So the first thing, just to kind of get us started with understanding this natural law, is that it's a natural law that is functioning, that exists, and it's affecting everyone at all times. Whether they're aware about this natural law or not, it's going to affect you. Just like the natural law of gravity. The natural law of gravity, whether you knew about it or not, it was still affecting you. When you were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, we didn't know about the natural law of gravity, but it was still affecting us. So this natural law is the same way, that it's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. This is essentially what you're awakening to on the path to enlightenment. When we're talking about awakening to enlightenment, we're talking about awakening to the natural law of Kamma, to be able to see this cause and effect or action and result. Because if you understand the natural law of Kamma, you'll naturally make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. But conversely, when we lack wisdom of this natural law, we're going to tend to make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results, and we just don't understand why oftentimes. So this natural law, the more you dive into it and understand it, it'll actually help you to be able to understand why you're experiencing certain things that you're experiencing. So this is talking about the natural law itself, where all the other teachings of the Buddha are helping you to understand wise decision making in relationship to this natural law. So when we studied the 5 precepts last night about killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants, these are wise decisions that an individual can make in order to produce wholesome results. But now we're going to go in and talk about this directly. This natural law of Kamma, it's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's affecting a being, whether they're aware of it or not. And there's no being or entity that oversees this. It's not like there's some being sitting somewhere and dishing out punishments and rewards. This natural law is just functioning all the time. It's cause and effect. Like, for example, if you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, people tend to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with you. It's not because any being is controlling that to occur. It's the results of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Kamma is. It's cause and effect, or action and result. The action of being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, then the result is that people will tend to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to you. And there's no being that's overseeing that or controlling it. It's a result of your decisions and what you're choosing to do. It's not a system of punishments and rewards, and it's not about who's at fault or who's to blame. That's not what the natural law of Kamma is. It's also not this mystical, magical, dark cloud that follows you around. Sometimes people think the natural law of Kamma is that you're depositing certain deposits into a bank account and then you withdraw things out of this bank account, or this mystical, magical thing. It's just literally cause and effect, action and result. Another way to think about it is a sequence of events. There's a sequence of events that led to any one particular thing. So why was the temperature in here a little bit cool? Well, because I turned on the air conditioning, right? There was a cause and then there was effect. And now the temperature is dropping a little bit. Why? Because we turned off the air conditioning. That's the Kamma. That's the cause and effect, or action and result. So everything you do in life, whatever decisions you make, it's going to produce some result. And oftentimes what we do is we blame other people for the results that we experience in life, because we don't understand this natural law, and we don't realize that what we're experiencing is actually a result of our own decisions. And one of the things that's very empowering about this is that if there's something that you don't particularly care for in your life that's going on, you can just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. Whereas if you continue to falsely believe that what you experience in your life is a result of other people's decisions, then you're stuck. Right? If everything in your life is a result of good luck or bad luck or fate or destiny, this is oftentimes what people think and what they believe. There's no such thing as good luck or bad luck. There's no such thing as fate or destiny. Everything you experience is a result of your decisions. Whereas if you believed in fate or destiny or good luck or bad luck, or that other people are causing certain unwholesome things in your life, you're locked in, you're stuck. You can't do anything to improve your life because it's fate, it's destiny. You're going to continue to experience whatever you experience. You can't do anything to change it. But when you can see the natural law of Kamma, that everything you experience is a result of your decisions, that's very empowering, because all you need to do is cultivate more wisdom about this natural law, make different decisions, and now you'll experience different results. And that's the real power in it. But it's oftentimes challenging for someone to see that very clearly. So I'm going to walk you through helping you see this more and more clearly. And then, as I always do, open up the questions that you guys might have so that you can see it more and more clearly. So this is just a summary slide to kind of summarize the natural law of Kamma, that you can see that it's your life, your decisions, and your results. That way you can be empowered by this natural law, right? It's the results of your decisions. So here's a few words from the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma that I've extracted in order to illustrate two important points about Kamma as you're getting ready to learn this. Now remember, everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. So this isn't the only things he taught about the natural law of Kamma. Out of this book series of 13 books, I devoted one book to helping you understand this natural law of Kamma. But in reality, you could say the whole entire book series is helping you to understand this natural law of Kamma. And all the teachings and all the classes and courses and retreats are doing the same thing. But here, there's two specific points that it's important to understand here in the original words of the Buddha. And then remember, you don't believe this. You learn it, you investigate it, you examine it. Then you reflect on it and independently verify it. And then you practice to be able to see the truth for yourself. So here, this first one, the Buddha says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is you create your own Kamma. Nobody else can create Kamma for you. It's your decisions that are leading to some result. It's not other people's decisions that are leading to some result. It's your decisions that are leading to a particular result. So that's what he's explaining here, that based on your decisions, you're experiencing either wholesome or unwholesome Kamma based on your decisions. Then the second one here, he says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. That some subsequent occasion is after the next rebirth, that if you were reborn countless times, that's some subsequent occasion. So this cycle of rebirth, that's not even something that you should ever believe in. You can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But what he's essentially saying to you here is, in the first line, he's saying you create your own Kamma. The second one, he's saying you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Whatever you do, either wholesome or unwholesome, you're going to experience it. You're going to experience it either in this life or some future life. And now if you understand that, and you can see that things that you've been experiencing in life, they tend to repeat over and over and over again. You keep experiencing the same things over and over and over again. This is the mind being stuck in that continuous cycle. But now you can cultivate wisdom to understand this natural law, and now you can escape that continuous cycle of going around and around and around. So here, when he's saying that you create your own Kamma and you can't run and hide from that Kamma, the next thing that you might come to is, well, if that's the case, let me figure out about this natural law of Kamma and become very wise about it so that then I can create only wholesome Kamma. Why would you be interested in continuing to produce unwholesome Kamma? But with a lack of wisdom, the mind doesn't know how to do that. So that's why you're learning, you're reflecting, and you're practicing. You're not believing. You're trying to get to that wisdom so that you can see the truth for yourself and now naturally make wiser decisions that produce wholesome results. So now I'm going to share with you the 4 types of Kamma so that you can understand what these are. There's something called wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. What wholesome Kamma is any decisions that you make that are harmless, they are going to produce wholesome Kamma. When you're making decisions that are harmless, you haven't harmed another being, so therefore you're going to experience wholesome results or wholesome Kamma. That's what Kamma is. It's the results of your decisions. So when you're practicing harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others, now you're making harmless decisions, and now there's no harm that comes to you. Like right now, you're sitting here, you're not causing harm to anyone. You're just sitting here listening to a person speak. That's all you're doing. You're not hitting anybody. You're not spitting on anybody. You're not poking anyone in the eye. So that's why no harm is coming to you, because you're not causing any harm. So when you practice making decisions that are harmless, then you'll experience wholesome results. But then if you make decisions that are harmful, this is going to produce unwholesome results, or unwholesome kamma. So this is why when we kill, when we steal, when we have sexual misconduct, when we lie, when we have substances that cause heedlessness, those are harmful decisions that are now going to produce unwholesome results for us in our life. So the Buddha is teaching you through the Eightfold Path and all of his other teachings how to make harmless decisions and get away from these unwholesome results. So this is harmless decisions lead to wholesome kamma, and harmful decisions lead to unwholesome kamma. And then there's something called old kamma and new kamma. What old kamma is decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of right now in the present moment. What new kamma is any decisions you're making now that you're going to experience in the future. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say 3 years ago, I filled out a government form to report my income to the government, and I filled out my tax form. And now this tax form, I lied on it. Or maybe I made an honest mistake, actually. But let's just say I lied on it, okay? And now I lied on that. I didn't report my income fully. And now 3 years later, the government finds out that I lied. And now they send me a notice, and they say, you owe us $1,000 because you owed us $1,000 3 years ago, but also you owe $1,000 in interest and $1,000 penalty. You now owe $3,000. This is my old kamma coming back to me for a decision I made 3 years ago where I lied. Okay, but now in the present moment, I have the ability to make a new decision that's going to now produce new kamma. And if you didn't know this path to enlightenment, if you didn't know that you can't run and hide from your kamma, then you might make an unwise decision in the present moment. You might try to lie. You might try to hide from this. You might try to rip up the document and throw it away and say, no way, I'm going to pay that money. That would be unwise, because now you're going to experience the results of that. So knowing this path to enlightenment, things like right intention, right speech, right action, this natural law of kamma, you might decide to either write a letter or call up the government and say, hey, I apologize. I take full responsibility for this issue. I made an unwise decision. I would like to pay this off, but I'm sorry, I don't have the money. I don't have $3,000. Is there something we can do to work this out? And they might say, we appreciate you taking responsibility for this. I tell you what, we're going to drop off that penalty. We're going to drop off the interest. You just owe us $1,000. And you can pay that over the course of multiple months if you like. We'll set up a payment plan for you. And this is the results of your decisions. Now that you're making wise decisions to no longer lie, to be loving and kind, to talk with right speech and being polite, kind, friendly, respectful, you can experience different results, right? Whereas if you lied, if you continue to hide this and continue to make those unwise decisions, then you're just going to continue to experience unwholesome results because you're making harmful decisions. So this is the difference between old kamma and new kamma. Old kamma is any decisions you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. And then any decisions you make now, you're going to experience those in the future. That's new kamma. And what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're looking to extinguish all your unwholesome kamma. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome results. You're only experiencing wholesome kamma. This is one of the reasons why the mind is so peaceful and so joyful. Well, you've eliminated the pollutions out of the mind. This is why it's so peaceful and so joyful. But also you're only making wise decisions, and the things that are coming back to you are only wholesome. It's only wholesome things. You're no longer making unwise decisions. Whereas if you continue to make unwise decisions, you're going to continue to experience unwholesome things coming back to you. Your friends and family are going to continue to be bitter and harsh and hostile with you because of your choice to be bitter and harsh and hostile. If you continue to lie, for example, if you were doing what I just described as an example, you're going to continue to get notices of money that you owe and penalties and interest fees. You're going to keep getting these unwholesome results coming back to you. So when you can awaken to the wisdom of this natural law, making wise decisions, what you can do is you can extinguish your unwholesome kamma by making only wise decisions. The way that I think about this is all throughout our life, we have been putting mud into our garden hose. When we're in the unenlightened state, we have certain craving, anger, and ignorance. And we've been putting mud into this garden hose. And now that mud is in the garden hose. That's from our unwise decisions. Now what you might be deciding to do is hook your garden hose up to a faucet and open up the faucet and get some clean water coming through this garden hose. If you come to the temple once a year, if you meditate once a month, something like this, okay, you've got a little drip going through that garden hose. It's going to take you a really long time to clear out this garden hose. But if you come to the temple regularly for various courses and retreats, you're building up your meditation practice, you're reading books, maybe you're consulting with your teacher, you're opening up that faucet wider and wider, getting more and more clean water coming through that garden hose. But even though you're putting clean water into this garden hose, it's going to spit mud for a while. Because of our old Kamma, because of the unwise decisions we made in the past when we had a lack of wisdom. So we're going to experience these unwholesome results coming back to us, even though you're on the path to enlightenment. You can't snap your fingers and instantly start making wise decisions and then instantly start getting wholesome results coming back to you, because you've made unwise decisions in the past, which is from your old Kamma. You're going to need to experience that. You're going to need to flush all that out. So as you get this water coming through the garden hose, it's going to spit mud. It's going to spit some mud, but then eventually you're going to get some clean water, and then it's going to spit some more mud, and then you're going to get some clean water, and then it's going to spit some more mud. But eventually you get enough clean water, enough wise decisions going into your life that as you make more and more wise decisions about how you interact in the world, you're going to get more and more wholesome results coming back to you. So by cultivating wisdom, you can put more and more wise decisions into your life, and then you can fully clear out this garden hose, and now you only have clean water coming out of the garden hose. That's the time you get to enlightenment. You've extinguished all your old unwholesome Kamma. All the old unwholesome Kamma that's coming back to you, you create new Kamma that is wholesome by making harmless decisions. But it's going to be challenging for you because right now your mind still has those pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance. Because here on the next slide, the Buddha is sharing with you how you create unwholesome Kamma. I talked about the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. Those are those pollutions or the defilements or the taints. These are the 3 high-level descriptions of what's plaguing the unenlightened mind. It's craving, anger, and ignorance, this unknowing of true reality. Whenever you're making decisions through craving, those are based on your own selfish desires. That's the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. When you make decisions through your own selfish desires, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And likewise, when you make decisions through anger, bitterness, hostility, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And when you make decisions through ignorance or unknowing of true reality, where the unenlightened mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand, it has a lack of wisdom of these natural laws, it'll produce unwholesome results. So that's why you're learning about these 3 unwholesome roots, and then you're implementing proactive training that the Buddha shares on the Eightfold Path, which includes meditation, but there's other things as well, to gradually bring down these pollutions. You're gradually eliminating the craving, anger, and ignorance, because you can't just snap your fingers and eliminate it instantly. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And while you're bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to still be making some unwise decisions. So you're still going to be putting a little bit of mud in that garden hose. Even though you're trying to flush it out, you're going to keep putting a little bit of mud in there as you go from this point forward. But slowly over time, what you're doing is you're developing this wholesome Kamma. You're developing your generosity, your loving kindness, and your wisdom. And that's the 3 wholesome roots. These 3 wholesome roots, you're bringing those up more and more in the mind. And now you start functioning through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which is the exact opposites of craving, anger, and ignorance. Because as long as you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce those unwholesome results. But when you can make decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, now you'll experience wholesome results. So that's what you're doing, is you're bringing these unwholesome roots down and ultimately uprooting those out of the mind by bringing the wholesome roots up. And now more and more you permeate in the mind this generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And this is what's going to produce the wholesome Kamma for you. Do you guys have any questions on this so far? You can ask with a microphone, or those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like.
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first one is that is there a difference in the Kamma when you have intentions or speech or make actions? For example, it's not the same that I think that I'm going to kill, that I have the intention of killing, but I don't do it anyway at the end. at the end that I kill. Is that a difference?
There is a difference. If you have certain thoughts and you're able to restrain the mind, then you're just experiencing that within your own mind. You're not actually causing harm to another being. But those unwholesome thoughts that you're having, that is your kamma, because you haven't purified the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. So you're still having those unwholesome thoughts. But restraining the mind and not causing harm to another being, this will significantly reduce your unwholesome kamma. So this is why once you get on this path to enlightenment, you might realize that there's a period of time where you're quietly frustrated. It's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly angry and hostile and bitter. If you're overtly angry, hostile, and bitter, you're putting that out into the world towards your parents, your siblings, your neighbors, your coworkers, and now that's all going to come back to you. If it's just internal in your mind, you've just got to eliminate that internally through the training that the Buddha shares with you.
Okay, thanks. And the other is that we have like a collective kamma.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I don't know, people in Gaza that the things that are happening in there with the war, there is like something like collective kamma or separately only.
Yeah, you can think of it that way, but it still comes back to your individual choices. So like if you look at a group of people or a population of people, they're making individual decisions and they're maybe electing a certain leader. And that's a decision that they've made individually, but collectively together, they've selected this particular leader. And now whatever's going on in that leader's mind, they're going to make decisions for the entire country, but it's individuals' decisions to either elect that leader and or to continue to reside in that place. So it's very wise to look at leaders, whether they have craving, anger, and ignorance, and choosing wisely who you choose to run your country. I can give you an example of this here in Thailand. That one time I was traveling here in 2010, and there was this big news flash that came on the news, and the Prime Minister came on, and he said, I'm just like to inform you all that there was a bomb that Cambodia flew an airplane over eastern Thailand and they dropped a bomb. And nobody got injured, nobody got hurt. We don't know why they did this, but we've talked to them. We let them know that we're going to let them calm down for 2 weeks. And then we're going to send a delegation to Cambodia to try to understand what's going on and why did they decide to bomb us. Now, this is a leader who isn't functioning through craving, anger, and ignorance. They're making wise decisions. I'm not sure about where you live, but I know where I grew up. If Canada dropped a bomb on the USA, they wouldn't have got that same response, right? But because the leader here at that particular time understood the natural law of Kamma, that when a bomb got dropped on Thailand, if they immediately started dropping bombs on Cambodia and killing people there, then it was just going to escalate into a really big problem. So the Thai people understanding Kamma and the leaders understanding Kamma, this is one of the reasons why the Thai people have never been colonized, where all the other Asian countries have been colonized by the French or the Spanish or the Dutch or some other Western power, where Thailand has never been colonized. And it's because they understand Kamma. When the French people would come to Thailand, they would have a delegation of people waiting for them, wowing them, smiling at them, feeding them, talking French with them. Then when the Germans would come or whoever else would come, they would have a delegation of people waiting for them, because they understood if we take care of these people, they won't see us as a threat because we're being kind to them, we're being polite, we're being friendly and warm. So a colonial power will usually try to control a population of people if they think that this is a threat to them. So the colonial powers never viewed Thailand as a threat because they were always loving and kind to them. So you do have collective Kamma, but it's still your individual decisions based on what you decide to do. Like if you elect a certain leader, that leader is going to affect the decisions of that country. And if you choose to continue to stay in that country, even though a leader got selected that you think is unwise, that's a choice that you're making. And now that individual choice is affecting you. Is that all your questions? You have one more?
Yeah, that was my question. But for example, we can make like what is it called? Wholesome Kamma in a form collective. For example, us here that we decided to make a good action. I don't know, and we put all together. We can make a wholesome Kamma.
Yes, but it's still individual decisions. So great example, we're going to the orphanage today. there's individuals that are making decisions to do that. And now when we do that, it's individual decisions. We're practicing generosity, but there is a certain kamma that when we go there, they're probably going to ask us, what temple are you guys from? Oh, we're from Wat Tung Yu. Oh, what do you do? Right. So we're creating this kamma for this place, but it's based on individual decisions that if only one or two people went to the orphanage and we only had a little bit of money to help them with certain things, there's not as much generosity. There's not as much loving kindness. There's not as much wisdom. So it's not going to produce as much wholesome kamma as it will. We're taking 12, 13, 14 people, and people are going to put money into a pot, and then we'll go buy some supplies, and it'll really help the orphanage. And we do those things without wanting or expecting to create kamma. We're not wanting something from the orphanage, but you need to know that, yes, this is how you create wholesome kamma, is by practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom on an individual basis.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. I think the lady next to you and this gentleman has a question. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what about the suffering of children? Is it like caused by the previous lives?
Yeah. So this is old kamma from our previous lives, that when we make decisions in our previous life, we are reborn because we didn't extinguish our pollutions of mind in our previous life. And now, based on the decisions we've made in our previous life, we're going to be reborn into a certain family. So as a child, say a 3-year-old child that's in an abusive family, they're not being punished, right, for what they've done in the past, but it's a sequence of events. Maybe they were very angry, very bitter, very harsh, very aggressive in the past. Maybe they were a lion and killing a lot of people or something like this. And now they're reborn into the human world for the first time. And now maybe they're experiencing abuse as a result of the decisions that they made in the previous life. So this is how you can experience results from previous lives. And the way that this is happening is based on craving, desire, attachment in the condition of your mind at the time of death, that you're then reborn into a new life. And then your kamma determines what realm and what condition you're reborn into. Whereas if you got to enlightenment in a previous life, you wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be here right now. But we didn't get to enlightenment, so therefore there's still work to do. We haven't cultivated wisdom about this world 100%, so we're still here trying to cultivate that wisdom. And once you cultivate your wisdom fully, then you can escape out of this continuous cycle. So that's how we understand that we experience certain difficulties as we're being born into the world and even as children. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a little bit follow up on the previous question, the difference between intention and actually the action, which have gone through the whole process. And
Did you lose your mic? Okay, we got another one there. Some impermanence. It's everywhere.
Yeah, following on that, what is the Buddhist point of view on rejoicing and inspiring someone to carry out bad action? Do you create a bad karma for yourself just rejoicing that someone is doing bad things? You're not actually doing something, but you're just rejoicing that someone is harming?
Yes, that's still coming from the craving, anger, and ignorance. So it's going to produce unwholesome results. So you would like to get to a point where when you see other people doing harmful things, that you're not rejoicing, that you see that as unfortunate. It isn't about going off into the world and changing other people. It's about doing the work to change your own mind and improve your own mind. And you will see other people doing harmful things. And that's where you need to be able to maintain your peace and your joy despite what's going on in the world. So one of the examples that I give, because I was a couple of years ago, I was in another country teaching, and I was in this market, and this father slapped a 8-year-old boy across his face, and it was really loud and it was quite violent. You know, I was able to maintain my peace and my joy, not because of that father hitting his child, but despite that having occurred. So right now, if somebody has craving, desire, attachment in their mind, they want every child to be safe. longing and yearning for it. When you see something like that, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated because you're not getting what you want. And yes, it would be wonderful to aspire, in this example, for all children to be safe. That's something we can aspire for. That's something we can work towards. But it's also the realization that for every child to be safe, it's not based on my decisions. Children around me are safe. I'm not causing any harm to any child, but I'm not the one who's making all the decisions because there's 8 billion people in the world. So it's a matter of getting to a point where you understand that there are going to be harmful things in the world, and those harmful things aren't coming from you and you can't affect them, but rejoicing in those harmful things would be unwise for you because there's still anger and ignorance in the mind.
So would it be wise then to generate compassion and loving kindness even towards those people who are committing those actions? I mean, understanding that they are acting from the what you say, pollutions, and that they are your mothers but still affected. Would it be wise to generate internally compassion and loving kindness?
Yes, that's what you're doing on this path, is that you're understanding that all the unwholesome decisions that are being made in the world are producing unwholesome results, and those are coming from the individual pollutions in each individual person's mind, and you can't change another person's mind. They have to do the work to do that. So any unwholesome things that you're seeing in the world, it's coming from other people's pollution of mind, and all you can do is what you're describing, is cultivate loving kindness and compassion. That's part of the Brahma Viharas, or those 4 healthy mental states, and that's part of the work that you're doing, that even though other people are doing things you disagree with, you can maintain your love and your kindness towards them. So even though I disagreed with this father hitting his child like that, I had loving kindness for him, a genuine interest in seeing him be well. And I had concern for his misfortune to be so angry and so bitter and so hostile in a public place, to be able to smack his child across the face like that. And then I had the same thing for his child, this loving kindness and compassion. But I knew that I can't solve that problem. I was in a foreign country. I don't speak the language. And even if I did, I'm not going to go over there and say anything, because that child at the end of the day needs to go home with that parent, and whatever that parent chooses to do, I can't protect that child. The child is experiencing that based on the craving, anger, and ignorance in the father's mind. And the only way to remedy that is the father needs to realize what he's doing is unwise. Now, that father is going to experience his karma, right? Because this child growing up, he's probably going to hate his dad. He's probably going to have fear of his dad. Their relationship is not going to be very conducive. And this father is probably going to get very old and have inability to have a wonderful relationship with his child. And that's the karma coming back to his dad for his craving, anger, and ignorance during his life. So you maintaining your loving kindness and compassion is what you'd like to do in all these situations, without judging other people, and just realizing any unwholesome results that you're seeing in the world, it's all coming from craving, anger, and ignorance on your individual level, but also on a global conflict level too. Like when we look at these wars and things like this, there's individuals somewhere in this world that have craving, anger, and ignorance, right? And now there's a global conflict, perhaps, where an individual says, hey, I want your land. This is their craving, right? Hey, I want your land. Give me that land. And then the other country says, no, you can't have our land. And now you're not getting your craving fulfilled. So now the anger arises. And what an unenlightened mind does when the anger arises is it tries to oftentimes fear other people into doing what you want them to do. So now I'm going to send my soldiers into your land, and I'm going to kill you and kill a whole bunch of people and bomb you and try to fear you into giving me what I want. So this is the craving of an individual. This is the anger arising, and it's coming from ignorance, because there's nothing beneficial that's ever come from a war. It's always going to produce destruction and mayhem and calamity. But even global conflict is all because of craving, anger, and ignorance. Anything unwholesome that you see going on in the world, you can trace it back to craving, anger, and ignorance. Whether it's an individual or whether it's an entire country, basing their decisions from a particular leader. That particular leader has craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind if they're producing unwise decisions that's then producing unwholesome results.
To the orphanage to see these children, and what you're saying is that maybe they did something in their past life to end up in the orphanage. But
sounds like you lost the mic there. His mic's working. That one. Jeannie, that one's working. He's confirmed it. He saw the truth for himself.
So we have some friends who adopted a Thai child from an orphanage. And one of the things they were saying is that there weren't enough carers or people to look after the children. So as a result, the children didn't get enough care or love or anything like that. And so as the children grew up, they realized that if they act inappropriately, then they will get attention. So how can you say that they did something bad in their old life? I mean, is that why they ended up in the orphanage, or the fact that they're acting out just because they wanted some love? How does that relate to karma?
Okay. So this is one of the most challenging things when we talk about the natural law of Kamma. Oftentimes this topic of children comes up because it's like, it's an innocent 3-year-old child. Why do they deserve to experience this? And, this word bad oftentimes comes up. I encourage you not to think of it as bad or good. Instead, I describe it as wise and unwise. And I encourage you to not think about it as punishment and rewards. Like, these children aren't being punished for the decisions that they made. These are just sequences of events that if your mind has certain pollutions in it, there's certain causes and conditions that are going to lead to the next result or the next action. So if you're in a previous life, if you saw, say, a 90-year-old man that was aggressive, hostile, and bitter and murdering someone, you would be like, that person should probably go to jail, right? There should be some consequences for that. Well, that 3-year-old child that you're seeing, they very likely could have been that 90-year-old man from prior, but you just didn't see that part. You're just seeing the 3-year-old child experience this unwholesome results, and you're not seeing the connection of what happened in their previous life to lead to that particular situation. So everything that we experience, there's this sequence of events that leads from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And you're not necessarily going to see every single thing that led to that particular thing. Even the Buddha says that if you try to understand the exact result of Kamma, it would lead to madness or frustration. So like somebody sometimes will ask me, like, if I slap my mom across the face, what will be the result? Well, to know the exact result, it's challenging to say. I can surely say that mom will probably cry. She'll probably be upset. She might slap you back. She might kick you out of your house. She might not cook you food anymore. That's all the results of your decisions. But then there's a certain amount of anger and hatred in the mind to slap your mom, right? And now that anger and hatred is not just coming out towards mom, it's coming out towards others as well. So it's really challenging to be able to look at a situation where there's a young child experiencing something and now they're experiencing unwholesome results, and the mind says, well, why? What's the exact thing that did this? And I refer to the teachings of the Buddha where he says, you can't understand exactly, because everybody experiences their Kamma in different ways. And it's based on what amount of wholesomeness you've done. One of the analogies that the Buddha gives is he says, okay, you have this lump of salt, and now there's this bowl of water, and you put this lump of salt in the bowl of water. Is the bowl of water undrinkable? Yes or no? Yes, it's undrinkable, right? You can't drink that water. But now say you take that same lump of salt and you put it into a river. Is that water drinkable or undrinkable? It's drinkable, right? You can still drink it. So the water represents the wholesome decisions that you've made. And if you've only made a limited amount of wholesome decisions in your life, that same lump of salt is going to affect this person differently than this person over here that's made all these wholesome decisions in their life. So if somebody has been born into a family where they're giving attention for unwise decisions, and now that child is being encouraged to do those unwise things, those are decisions that child is making. And of course, at 3 years old, 6 years old, they don't have the wisdom to know what is wise or unwise. But they were born into that family that has a lack of wisdom. And now they're experiencing the results of their decisions of having not got to enlightenment in their last life. And because of the pollutions in their mind and the condition of their mind, their Kamma, they're now being born into this family where now this family lacks wisdom to be able to learn and practice these teachings in such a way that's going to produce wholesome results. But then there's other children who are born into families that have quite a lot of wisdom, and now they learn and they grow and they develop and they learn what's wise and unwise, and then they're able to create a really wonderful life for themselves. So everything we experience is a result of our decisions, either in this life or our previous lives, but you just might not see exactly what it is. But it's the sequence of events. It's not punishment and rewards. It's a sequence of events of one thing leading to the next. She's got a follow-up. We've got people online. They'll appreciate you using the mic.
So maybe he had made some bad decisions in a previous life, but now that he's in the orphanage and got no attention, unless he behaved inappropriately, is that an unwise decision for a baby or a little child to make because they crave love?
Yeah, well, now being in an orphanage, they have an opportunity to extinguish their old Kamma. So the orphanage that we're going to, most of the children are there because their parents are in prison for drugs or something like this, or they might have been dead, and that's the reason why they're there. And these are older children. They're not very young. I think the youngest one is 12 or 13, because I like to tend to support places that don't typically get support. Like all the orphanages has like the 3-year-olds and 6-year-olds, they get lots of support because there's the little tiny kids and everybody would like to support them. But this orphanage, they don't really get much support. So that's why I go there. So now being in an orphanage, this particular person that you're going to meet who runs the orphanage, he teaches them, he guides them, he functions like a father because he himself grew up in an orphanage, and now he's giving back, and he's created an orphanage, him and his wife, and now they're helping these children to sort out their life. And even when they turn 18, he allows them to still stay there if that's what they need. And then he helps them get a job, he helps them get an apartment, he helps them really get going in life. And this is the Kamma. This is the results of your decisions. So now maybe you were born into a family where your parents were addicted to drugs or selling drugs, or they died, but now you're going to this orphanage where now you have an opportunity to improve your Kamma by learning some wisdom and now make a better life for yourself. And there's people like this in the world, this gentleman who's doing this, and then there's people like us that we're going to go there and we're going to support this gentleman. He's doing this great work on a day-to-day basis, and we can't be there with the kids every single day, but we can go there for a couple of hours, give them a bunch of food and say, hey, great job, guys, keep it up, we're here to support you, please have this food. And now we're helping those beings to come out of those difficulties. So while your journey to enlightenment is focused on yourself, when we're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, we can also help other beings that are disadvantaged beings, because maybe we're a bit more fortunate, we have more resources, and now we can help these disadvantaged beings to improve their life. And this is how the world slowly becomes a better and better place. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Thank you. This just a question, and I don't want to get off topic, and it might be a broader topic to discuss some other time. But so there's been a lot of discussion about rebirth and past life and karma from past life into this life. Does the Buddha, in his teachings, talk about what I would call the transmission mechanism, like the technicalities? Like, what is it that's being reborn? It's obviously not the body.
Yep. Yeah.
Probably not the mind, although the mind seems to be affected by the karma which is inherited. And then, and it might be a broader topic, yes, but honestly, the process of the death, what happens in between, the rebirth comes up, and then at the end, you say when you get enlightened, we the person, doesn't come back. What happens to the person then? It might be a big topic, but
yeah, we can talk about this here if you like. So the Buddha talks about this and teaches about this. The word that he uses in the original source teachings is called samsara. This is the word that you'll see, that when he's talking about the cycle of rebirth, it's samsara. And throughout history, we've been translating this as the cycle of rebirth. Based on the way the Buddha describes this samsara occurring, I would encourage you to think about it as the cycle of new existence, because there isn't anything that's actually being reborn. It's a completely new existence every single time. It's a completely new body and a completely new mind that is coming together to now create the person, for example. So let's use the example of, say we have cardboard box A, that has certain contents. There's certain cravings and certain residual memories in the mind of this particular cardboard box A. And now at the end of this cardboard box A's life, it withers away. Now those contents of craving and residual memories go into this cardboard box B. Cardboard box B is a completely different shape, color, texture, completely different cardboard box. But the cravings and residual memories come into this new cardboard box. And that's how beings in the current life are now making decisions based on previous things that occurred. And this is how you experience your Kamma from your previous lives. So if you have craving at the time of death, that's the fuel that causes rebirth. Just like a fire, if you have a fire that has logs and you put these logs into a fire, it's going to send off sparks. As long as this fire has fuel, it's going to send off sparks. And now this spark being carried by the wind, it's going to land and then it's going to ignite a new fire. And it's a completely new fire. It's not the same as the old fire. It's a completely new fire. But because there was fuel in this old fire, it's going to send off sparks. So this is why we refer to the three poisons as the three fires, because the craving, anger, and ignorance is sending off sparks. As long as you have craving in your mind at the end of this life, it's going to send off a spark that creates that new consciousness. And now that new consciousness is going to find a body. It's going to find a body somewhere, talking about rebirth into the human realm. But it's a completely new existence. So let me now give you an example. Say we have Bob, who in that life, he was very active sexually and having lots of different sex with people. And he still had craving at the time of death. And then when he died, those cravings and residual memories now enter into this new mind. And this new mind now finds a body. And now this being is born. And we call this being Barbara, right? And now this being Barbara is growing up. And now with these cravings and residual memories, Barbara is motivated to also have sex with lots of people. And now maybe Barbara contracts HIV and she dies at the age of 30 or 40. This is the Kamma from decisions that that being has made, but it's also coming from the old Kamma, from what Bob was doing, that the cravings were never extinguished, and now they've been transferred into this new mind, created this new mind. So as long as there's craving at the time of death, there's going to be a rebirth. If you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated your cravings, desires, attachments. There's all those fires have been extinguished. You now have generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. You're only practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's no craving, anger, and ignorance whatsoever. You fully awoke to enlightenment. Well, now, once you die as an enlightened being, the Buddha leaves this as an undeclared teaching. He describes it as an undeclared teaching. He explains, he says, these are the teachings I declared. He said, this is what I taught. I taught discontentedness, the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of it in the path forward, how to completely eliminate discontentedness. That's what I taught. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach these things. And he gives 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of the things that he didn't teach is what happens next, if anything at all. And he wisely left this as an undeclared teaching. So he didn't declare whether there is existence or there isn't existence after you get to enlightenment. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's so peaceful and so joyful, you're not going to care. Your mind in the present moment is so peaceful and so joyful. If there's something that's next, either it's as good as what you're experiencing now or it's better. And if there isn't anything next, okay, so be it. Who cares? You're very peaceful and joyful now in the present moment. So that answers your question, I feel, unless you have a follow-up.
Yeah, sure. Very, very helpful. That's fine. I'm still curious about how the spark of craving gets from box A to box B.
Okay.
But yes, that last point about the Buddha not teaching about what happens post enlightenment, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
The Buddha does talk about what's called the stations of consciousness. And it's a teaching that I have in this book series, but it's not something that I memorized because it's not going to lead to your elimination of discontentedness. But if you're interested in looking at it, I think it's in volume 11. That whole book is dedicated to the cycle of rebirth. So you could look at it there. It's titled The Stations of Consciousness, and he walks you through the stations of consciousness. I've observed past lives. This is one of the ways that people know about the cycle of rebirth, is you can observe past lives. So there was 2 previous human existences before this, and there was countless animal existences before this. So from the first human life to the second human life, there was about 500 years in between. And from the second life to this one, there was almost 2,000 years in between. So it's not instantaneous rebirth. The consciousness can kind of be out there for a while before it actually finds a new body in order to be reborn. But if you're interested to know exactly what that mechanism is, I would refer you to that discourse of the Buddhas. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, David, my question was about when you were talking about somebody filing that tax return, for example, and breaking the law, whether intentionally or not. Is it always a bad thing, or is it always unwise to break human laws? I'm thinking about situations where people are crossing borders, looking for safety. I'm thinking about situations where laws are not always fair or equitable. What would you say about that?
We're going to talk about laws of society here in a moment. I've got it as part of this. So let's talk about it then. And if I don't answer that, be sure to bring it back up. Mm-hmm. Victoria?
Well, just curious about what you said about Thailand and all these nations that were colonizing other nations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the reason why they were colonizing other nations is not only because they were seeing those nations as threats, but also they wanted, natural resources and other benefits for them. And I was wondering why then Thailand was not colonized. And you said that, well, they were having all this loving kindness attitude towards other nations.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I was wondering if they were, like Thailand was colonizing at the same time, or they were like a very peaceful nation that were not doing anything in that regard. I'm unaware of the history of Thailand, so I don't know. That's one question.
Maybe we can talk about that when we're in the van, since I would like to talk more about the natural law of Kamma, but I'll help you understand that.
Oh, it's just, well, that would be fantastic. But also, like, the main question was if then the loving kindness they were practicing was somehow protecting them from these nations that were actually not so loving and kind and colonizing other nations.
Okay, so maybe we'll talk about it then. Okay, so what I've learned from anthropologists and researchers about why colonization happened over the years is that typically a colonial power will see a certain group of people that speaks a different language than them and looks different than them and has different culture and customs and beliefs. And that colonial power might look at that group of people and label them as savages, right? And now these people are savages, and we need to teach them our language. We need to teach them our religion. We need to teach them our ways. And then they'll be appreciative of us having taught them our ways, which are much better than their way. And now they won't attack us. And then, yes, also because of resources too, right? The people would like resources. So this is like coming from the ego, right? Like what we're doing is so much better, and these people are savages. And now let's label them as savages. And now if we teach them, then this will make them appreciative of what we've done, and now they won't attack us. So the Thai people, this is why they would have people speaking French and speaking different languages, because then when they meet these people at the border, then they didn't get labeled as savages because they were doing things very politely, very kindly, very friendly, very respectfully. They were feeding them and taking care of them and showing them that, hey, we're no threat. And now through practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it produced wholesome results for them that they weren't colonized. The Thai people didn't try to colonize anyone. The Thai people that are in Thailand today, they originally started in northern Vietnam, what we would consider to be northern Vietnam, but it wasn't northern Vietnam then. So the ethnic group of Thai people were there. The Chinese people started coming down and putting population pressure on the Thai people, that they were trying to expand their empire. And there's kind of like two ways to expand your empire is you can rape, murder, pillage, destroy, fight wars, kill people. And this is one way to take over new land. Another way to do it is to just have your people go out and send them out, take their stuff with them, and then put it down and start living in that place. It's much better for PR to do it that way, right? So this is what the Chinese people did, is they kind of walked down south, putting population pressure on the Thai people. There was only so many crops that could be created, only so many foods that could be available. So the Thai people started migrating westward. And there's a migration path there where you can see the ethnicity and the culture, the customs, the linguistics that go from northern Vietnam all the way across over to Burma and then down into Thailand. Because Burma and Cambodia were fighting over this land that we call Thailand. they were really wanting this land because it's very fertile, because the river going through it, and it produces lots of crops. So the Thai people were trying to get away from this population pressure, but they ended up finding themselves in a war in between two countries, Cambodia and Burma. And now the Burmese were doing the rape, murder, pillage, destroy, enslave the Thai people. So that's why Chiang Mai was originally the capital of Thailand, but they had to keep moving it south. They moved it down to Sukhothai, down to Ayutthaya, and then ultimately to Bangkok, or what the Thais call Krung Thep. And that was like their last stand, because their backs was up against the water at that point. So as the Burmese were coming down and doing all this rape, murder, and pillage and destroy, the Thai people were just trying to protect themselves and create a space for them to live. And this is why you can look at Thailand at this point is a more developed country than Myanmar. Myanmar is still suffering from its Kamma from all these years of hostility and craving, anger, and ignorance, and that rape, murder, pillage, and destroy. And you can look at Cambodia, and Thailand is more developed than Cambodia as well. And this is the Kamma as a result of the decisions that the people made. And you can even see this here in Chiang Mai, that the Thai people built a lot of temples and a lot of Buddhist things. And this is why you guys may have come to Chiang Mai, is to see these things. This is producing the Kamma, the wholesome Kamma, because they're practicing the generosity, the loving kindness, and wisdom. And now for so many centuries, they've been investing in these temples and these big Buddha statues, and now people want to come see them. And they have this regular revenue of people coming to visit. But you don't see that to be the case for Myanmar and Cambodia as much, because of the Kamma, that they're not necessarily practicing the teachings as closely as you see here in Thailand.
That they just peacefully occupy this land. That's how it happened.
That's what the Thais were trying to do, but they found themselves in a war because they were kind of creating a wedge between the Burmese and the Cambodians. And then they kind of carved out this space. And then as they were carving out land, rather than trying to colonize others, they actually succeeded land in different situations. I think there was like 70 different land successions where they gave, like Lao. The whole reason why Lao was created is because the French people came in and tried to colonize the Thai people. And they, at the river, they cut that off and they said, okay, you guys can have that. And this is one of the reasons why people in Lao, they're kind of like cousins and brothers of Thai people. And it's like, why'd you guys let us go? You know, why didn't you protect us? But the French felt more protected because there was a river between Thailand and Lao. And usually when there's mountains and rivers, it's a lot harder to fight and go to war. So the French people felt protected. So Thailand has been through about 70 different land successions where they've given away little pieces of land here and there in order to just appease somebody, so that that power would be appeased, and then they could kind of create a country for themselves where they could live in peace. Okay. Oh, you have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I will say slow because my English is not very good.
Mm-hmm.
If one believe Buddhist, they will believe Kamma. And according to Kamma, people will become other realms of existence, like animals or asuras.
Mm-hmm.
But other religion has another rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, if someone don't believe Kamma or Buddhist, will he follow the law of Kamma? Is Kamma universal?
Mm-hmm. You should never believe anything that is being taught here. So you're not believing the natural law of Kamma. That's why I'm teaching it to you like this, so you can learn it. You can reflect on what I'm sharing, and then you can practice to be able to see the truth for yourself. So I would encourage you not to believe anything, the natural law of Kamma or the cycle of rebirth or any of these things. This natural law is affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. So it doesn't matter what you believe, this natural law is indeed affecting you. So for example, let's just say you went outside on the street, and I know you wouldn't do this, but let's just say you punched somebody in the face. Your Kamma is that you've caused harm. That was a decision that you made. And now that person's probably going to punch you back, perhaps, or they're going to throw you around, or maybe they pull out a knife or a gun or a baseball bat. You don't know, right? That you're going to experience some result. You're going to potentially even go to jail for that. So that's the Kamma. So you can see that this is the truth, that it's not something to believe in. And then the more that you learn about it, then you can navigate the world through this natural law.
So you think Kamma is universal?
It's universal. It applies to everybody. Everybody's experiencing it, whether you're aware of it or not. You're experiencing the results of the decisions that you make. And the more ignorance or unknowing of true reality, or the lack of wisdom or misunderstanding you have of this natural law, the more difficult your life's going to be. The more wisdom you have about this natural law, the more at ease your life's going to be, because you're going to be making wise decisions that produce wholesome results.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let me share with you now about how to eliminate unwholesome karma. I already talked about it a little bit with the garden hose, that we've been putting this mud into the garden hose, and then you're hooking the garden hose up to the faucet, right? And you're putting this fresh water into the garden hose. Well, that fresh water, the wise decisions that you're putting into the garden hose, this is coming from the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching that the Buddha shares, that's going to teach you the wise decisions about how to make wise decisions. He's not trying to force you or convince you to do anything. He's just showing you what he did in order to produce this enlightened mind. So as you're learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, which is right view, all the way through right concentration, as you're learning, reflecting, and practicing, not believing it, but practicing it, that's where you'll see more and more wise decisions going into your life, and now you'll experience more and more wholesome results because of that. Through producing only wholesome karma, you're extinguishing your unwholesome karma. But you're going to need to experience the results of your old karma, the unwise decisions that you made in the past. You're going to need to experience that before you make your way out of it. So let me give you an example. When I was growing up, our family was quite hostile, quite bitter. And this is what I learned growing up from my family, to be very harsh and very bitter to the people around me. And we kind of feared people into doing things that we wanted them to do. And this is what I learned from the adults around me. So as I was growing up in life, I was choosing to do things that differently, but I still had a certain amount of bitterness and hostility that was in my mind. So by the time I met my wife, we've been together since 2007. By the time I met her, there was a certain amount of peacefulness and politeness there, enough that she was interested in having a relationship with me. But at different times, I would be bitter and I would be harsh and I would be hostile with her. And I did this all throughout our relationship. For the first 11 years, I was making very unwise decisions in our relationship. And she was learning that from me, all this bitterness and hostility. And there would be times where we would be arguing, we'd be upset, and we'd be angry and yelling and hollering at each other. But eventually I decided, I'm done with this. I'm tired of going through all of this. At the 11-year mark, I started to then get focused on these teachings more and more closely. And I started transforming my mind and doing something different. But my wife had still experienced all this bitterness and hostility from me. So even though I was choosing to do something different, she was still being bitter and harsh and hostile with me. So there would be times where I would come home and something happened that she didn't particularly care for, and she would maybe be yelling or hollering at me or being upset with me. Where in the past I would yell and holler right back, and then we would just have a big fight. But I decided to do something different because I was interested in practicing the Eightfold Path and extinguishing these unwholesome results, these unwholesome karma that I had created in the past. I needed to do something different. So now when she was being argumentative with me, I chose to be polite and kind and friendly and respectful. Sometimes I would just walk away, let her sit there and yell. Other times I had more control over my mind. I would just sit there and I would smile. And then when she was done, I would say, okay, thank you, dear. And I would why her and I'd walk away. Right. But I ensured that I wasn't being bitter and hostile and harsh back, because if I continue to be bitter and harsh and hostile back, it's just going to come back to me. So it took about 1.5 years for her to fully extinguish all of that. But I had to experience that. That was my karma coming back to me because I had been bitter and harsh to her. So I had to extinguish that. So there were times where she would be yelling and hollering at me, and I would say, anything else, dear? Get it all off your chest. Come on, just say it all. I would kind of incite her to get it all out because I knew she had these fires burning in her mind. And I was interested in her extinguishing her fires, because by her extinguishing that aggression, that hostility in her mind, then eventually she would extinguish all of that. Her pollutions would be gone, and then she'd be more loving and kind. So sometimes I would sit there and say, anything else? Come on, give it to me. I know I used to do this to you too. Come on, give it to me. Go ahead, say it. Eventually, after 1.5 years, she extinguished it all. And now for the last 5 or 6 years, there's been no problems. We don't get upset with each other. We don't argue with each other. We're not bitter and harsh and hostile at all. We're just loving and kind with each other. So we've been together for 17 years. but we've been happily together for 5 years, right? So it takes time to work on your relationship. It's not meet, and then live happily ever after, right? It's not meet, get married, and then live happily ever after. That's not the way marriage works. For anybody who's in a relationship, you know that you need to learn each other. You need to figure out each other. So it took us about a good 11 years to figure this out. And then another year and a half for her to fully extinguish her poisons and pollutions in her mind, so that now we can be loving and kind with each other all the time. There's never arguments in our house. There's never bitterness or hostility. Even with our son, we have a 11-year-old son that he doesn't yell, he doesn't get upset, because part of my unwholesome Kamma was not only was I experiencing this aggression and hostility from my wife, but my son had learned some of that stuff from me and his mom as well. And he was starting to talk bad to his mom. And this is where it really kicked in. And I started noticing him talking bad to his mom. So not only did I need to extinguish my Kamma through helping my wife get closer and closer to enlightenment, but I needed to help my son too, because he had this turbulent relationship with his mom that was forming, that was starting to be conducted. So now having everybody in the house who has either extinguished these 3 poisons or in the process of doing so, everything's peaceful, everything's joyful in our home. And that's what you're going to need to do, that you're going to need to first do the work on your own mind so that you have more inner discipline and more control of your mind. And then in situations where your mom or your dad or your brothers or your sisters or your life partner, your children or being aggressive and hostile and bitter, you're going to need to be able to control your mind and be calm, because if you keep putting out aggression and hostility, it's just going to keep coming back to you. So that's how you extinguish your unwholesome Kamma in your relationships, is by you transforming your mind first, and then you doing something different that you haven't done before, which is remain calm and collected. And that's where the training of the Eightfold Path is going to help you to be able to do that and understand how to do that. So this is how you can clean up your Kamma. Okay, so now let's talk about laws of society, because sometimes when we see certain things happening in society based on governmental laws, you might see somebody who was found with blood in their house, blood in their car, bloody shoe print at a murder scene, and they go to court and they're found not guilty. And you're like, hey, David, you said that you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Isn't that person running and hiding from their Kamma? Well, the answer is no, that the laws of society are imperfect because they're created by human beings, they're administered by human beings. So while we should always aspire for more and more fair and equitable laws, we need to come to the understanding that human laws are going to be applied unfairly because they're applied by human beings. So this natural law of Kamma is functioning at all times. So even though a person went to court and they were found not guilty, they haven't escaped their Kamma. The going to jail or going to prison, that's just one component of their Kamma. There's other things that this person is experiencing as well, besides just going to jail. And you may not be there to see those things occurring, because if you have enough anger and hostility in your mind that you can literally kill another human being, just because you were found not guilty in court, it doesn't extinguish that anger and that bitterness. It's coming out in all your other relationships too. So this individual who might be found not guilty, they're experiencing these other results that you may or may not be able to see depending on how close you are to the person. So you might notice that this person experiences a bad reputation in the community, that there's certain sickness or disease, certain physical and mental pain that they experience. They can experience a shorter lifespan as a result of killing. They have a certain amount of hostility and aggression where they're in fights. And because of that hostility and aggression and fighting other people, now that they're out and free, they're not in jail, they can be killed themselves. They can also experience a loss of income or a loss of wealth because now people aren't interested in giving them a job because they know that they've gone to court and they were found not guilty, sure, but it's all over the news that they had the bloody footprint at the murder scene and all these other things, right? So there can be these technicalities based on human laws being imperfect that this person can be found not guilty in a court of law. But the natural law of Kamma is functioning at a much higher level. So they can be experiencing all of these things, including difficulties in relationships, securing and progressing in employment, securing housing, acquiring necessities to sustain life. And then, of course, discontentedness and rebirth as well. An individual who's killed, oftentimes they have guilt, shame, and fear in their mind. And it's very challenging for them to get away from that. So you can't run and hide from your karma. You're going to experience it. It just might not be delivered in the way that you're looking for. If you're looking for someone to be found guilty in a court of law, in some cases that's going to happen, and it's going to happen the way it needs to happen. But because of impermanence, we know that these human laws can't be administered fairly amongst all people, even though we should continue to aspire to do that there's going to be some people who are found not guilty. And there's going to be some people who are not guilty, and they're going to be found guilty, right? This happens too, that people go away to prison when they're not guilty. And where this can come from in terms of karma is, let's just say I'm 17, 18, 20 years old. I'm hanging out with some drug dealers or a gang or something like that. And now say this gang goes and kills somebody. I wasn't there. I was maybe at home. But now, because of my choice to associate with these people and do unwise things, maybe I didn't kill that person that is now I'm going to court for, but maybe I did other unwise things that I never got caught for. Maybe I've been selling drugs. Maybe I've been killing other people that I never got caught for. But now this person that has gotten killed, I wasn't there, but maybe I got found guilty just because of my association with these individuals. So this is how these things happen, that the human laws are imperfect. And the karma that an individual is experiencing is above and beyond just the prison system and the jail system. There's all these other things that you can experience as well as a result of your decisions. And you may not be there to see when these things are occurring. So you can be assured that no matter what an individual is deciding to do, they are going to experience their karma, either wholesome or unwholesome, based on wise or unwise decisions. And you just may not be there when that person is experiencing any particular karma. You guys have questions on this? Or I don't know if I answered your question or not, Arturo.
It's more about, is it ever justifiable to break human laws, and how does that relate to karma?
Okay, so this is a challenging one. I wouldn't say that it's justifiable to break a law, but in some situations, let's say this: if you break a law, it's an unwise decision, because now there's a whole bunch of people in that government that can identify that you've broken the law, and then now you can be held accountable for that. Right? That can surely be a result. But depending on how you look at the natural law of Kamma, like I think the example you gave is like migrating from one country to another. An individual could stay in their own country, maybe get murdered, or they could try to take their chances and cross a border illegally, and now that's a way for them to stay alive. Right? So this is where these teachings, they're not plug and play. It's not a decision tree to say, if this happens, do that, and if this happens, do this. This is where, moving to a higher consciousness, you need to be able to think through all the variables that you're experiencing and decide, would it be wiser for me to stay here in this country where I could potentially get murdered? The gangs have been coming at me and trying to murder me. Or is it better for me to take my chances, and maybe I'll end up in prison in that other country, or maybe I'll even get sent back, but maybe for the next 3 years, at least I won't be around and potentially get murdered, right? So this is where you have to weigh the options and decide for yourself in any given situation, what is the wisest decision to make. We were talking about this related to veganism the other day, where I was talking about how there's not a perfect solution oftentimes whenever you're experiencing a certain thing, where it would be very unwise and unadvisable to hold on to an unwise decision because the perfect decision isn't available, right? So it would be unwise to stay in that situation where you can easily be killed by a gang because the perfect decision doesn't exist yet. Oftentimes it's better to let go of that unwise decision to stay in that area and move to another area. Or like we were talking about it in terms of veganism, that it can be wise to let go of animal products and move to plant-based food supply, even though knowing that there is some contamination in vegetables and fruit to a certain degree. But if we wait for the perfect solution, then we're going to continue to hold on to this unwise decision. So that's unadvisable. So this is where you have to look at all the variables and decide for yourself. It's not that it's always wise to break a law, and it's not that it's always unwise to break a law either, but just weighing your options, you can see that there are going to be consequences of breaking that law. And now, depending on what you were facing otherwise, it could be potentially a wise or unwise decision.
I just think sometimes, I don't know if this is shared by other people here as well, but there are situations sometimes where I feel like some of the teachings, for example, may clash in my mind, right? And be at odds with each other. Let's say, for example, what you just said. Sometimes some teachings in my mind, when I try to analyze certain situations, might be at odds with each other. And maybe it's just because I'm still working my way through all of this. But in the example that you just gave, where people are saying, well, if I want to save my life and be safe, then it would probably be better to cross the border, even though it's illegal. Mm-hmm. But couldn't it be argued that you could say, well, you're attached, this is craving, you're attached to your own safety, your own life, rather than being ready to let it go, for example? I mean, I know this is probably a bit of an extreme situation.
So none of the teachings of the Buddha are in conflict with each other. If somebody's seeing conflict or they're seeing disparities, this is just because the mind doesn't understand them 100% yet. So it's good that you're asking questions to get that clarity, where what you need to do in order to practice these teachings is you need to have loving kindness and compassion for this being. Like we were talking about earlier, that if you don't have loving kindness and compassion for this being, then you're not going to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So if you're not alive, you can't get to enlightenment, right? So if you're in a position where you're potentially going to meet death very soon, it's wise to leave. And you can do that without craving, desire, attachment. Like the Buddha, at one time, he was starving himself. And that's what people thought was going to lead to enlightenment. So he was doing that for a period of time. But then he realized that that was unwise and he came to the middle. So choosing to leave out of an area because you could potentially meet death doesn't have to be because of craving. It can be because you're choosing to show loving kindness and compassion to this being, and that you're choosing to move to another area so that you don't experience death. Let's use a more simple example about breaking laws and stuff like this. Obviously, it's wise to drive the speed limit. It's always wise to drive the speed limit, right? But say somebody's arm was chopped off and they're bleeding profusely from their arm. If you can drive a little bit faster, get them to a medical facility faster, this would potentially be wise, right? If you can do that with a clear mind and make wise decisions to not get in an accident yourself, in that situation, breaking the law of speeding could potentially be a wise decision in order to help this person to sustain their life. Because sustaining life is really helpful, because then you have the opportunity to get to enlightenment. Whereas if we were indifferent and we could care less and we let this person bleed out on the side of the street, then this isn't showing loving kindness and compassion to that individual. So in some situations, it might be wise to break a law. In other situations, it may not be. And this is where, if you do break a law, there's going to be consequences and you need to weigh that option. But in some situations, the option to break the law is of less consequence than continuing to stay over here where you're going to get murdered or this person is going to bleed out and die. And that's where going to a higher consciousness and getting to this enlightened mental state, it's not this plug and play or decision tree that if this happens, do that. If this happens, do this. This is where you need to take in all the variables, and based on what you know about the natural laws of existence and the natural law of Kamma, decide what would be wisest in this situation. And that's why when students come and ask me personal guidance, I never tell them what to do, because I can't know the variables 100%. I can give them guidance and say, okay, if you do it this way, this is what you'll generally experience. And if you do it this way, you'll generally experience this. But only that student knows the variables 100%. And that's what it means to get to this higher consciousness, is that you're taking your time to make wise decisions with wisdom, rather than rushing through life with craving, anger, and ignorance and making unwise decisions. You can slow the mind down and make wise decisions that's going to produce beneficial results for you, or wholesome results. I saw this gentleman, you had your hand up, right?
Speaking about that crossing borders, or it sounds like trying to escape your karma, whereas I think what you have to experience, whereas you escaping from anything, like you're experiencing some bad karma, results of your previous bad karma, and trying to escape it now. Is it not the way that you purify karma by experiencing it instead of escaping? You will have to, maybe you will escape it for today, for a year, for months or whatever, but you will have to experience it at the end, because that's what you have to experience.
Yeah, you're going to experience your karma either way. But remember, you're going to be experiencing old karma, and now you need to create new karma that are wise decisions. So using this example of I'm living in a country and gangs are coming to attack me and trying to kill me. This is old Kamma. These are decisions I've made in the past that are now coming back to me in the present moment. But now in the present moment, seeing this old unwholesome Kamma coming to me, I need to make new decisions that are going to produce wholesome Kamma. And that new decision can be to leave the country or to leave to another town or something like this. So it doesn't mean that you just sit still and let somebody kill you and say, oh, this is my Kamma. I guess this person's going to kill me. Instead, you recognize that, I got all this unwholesome Kamma coming back to me. Somebody's trying to kill me. This is my old Kamma that is unwholesome. Now in the present moment, let me make some new decisions that extinguishes this by choosing to move on and do something different perhaps. So it would be unwise to stay in that situation where somebody's trying to kill you. It's best to move on, making new decisions that are going to be wise decisions that produce wholesome results. You're extinguishing your old unwholesome Kamma by making new decisions that are wise and that are wholesome. So maybe my old decision was I'm staying in this town where maybe I was selling drugs, maybe I was involved in the gangs, and now I've gotten out of the gang and now I'm still in the same town, which is very unwise. If you're going to get out of a gang or you're going to get out of that kind of lifestyle, it's better to completely move somewhere else so that you're not dealing with those people that you did unwise things with. That's the way to extinguish this unwholesome Kamma, is completely get out of this lifestyle and move on to a completely different area. And that would be extinguishing your old Kamma, your unwise decisions. Okay, so it's a little bit after 12. There's another discussion that I have to share with you guys about what is merit. Are you guys okay if I continue to go? You guys can just use the bathroom and stuff like this, because we're going to break at 12:30, which is about 15 minutes from now. This topic of what is merit, it usually takes me a good 45 minutes or an hour to talk about it, but I'm going to consolidate it into 15 minutes so that you guys can learn it. And then we can take a break at 12:30, and then we'll go to the orphanage at 1:30. Okay. So if you guys need a bathroom or you need some water or something, feel free to help yourself. Okay. So let me just continue forward here. There's the break. Okay. We all had a break. Okay. Now we're back. All right. What is merit? So this is a unique type of wholesome Kamma that you produce as a result of your decisions. There's something called generosity, and then there's something that's called merit. And I'm going to show you the difference between these two. And I'm just going to flip forward to here. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice generosity, which is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. So you're going to need to practice generosity with lots of individuals in your life. This is training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. It doesn't mean you exhaust your resources. It doesn't mean that you crave and desire to practice generosity. You still need to practice generosity from the middle way, where you're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. And this is one of the things that we're doing today, is going to the orphanage to practice generosity. That's why I scheduled it into the retreat at this point, because this is where I teach you about generosity, right? So you're going to need to practice this generosity. And what you do when you're practicing generosity is you ask yourself this question: was this an offering to a teacher to support the continued sharing of the Buddha's teachings, helping others to attain enlightenment? And if the answer is no, then there's these benefits that you're experiencing the elimination of craving, desire, attachment, and it's helping you to produce wholesome Kamma or wholesome results because your mind's becoming more generous, that you're giving and sharing. Because a mind with craving, desire, attachment, you'll tend to hold on to things very tightly. You'll become selfish. You'll feel inhibited from sharing and practicing generosity. So you're going to need to practice generosity to train the mind to let go and eliminate craving, desire, attachment. But then if you're practicing generosity and it was to help the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha, this is called merit. And you're helping to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, but you're also helping others to gain access to the teachings of the Buddha. And this is producing wholesome Kamma. So sometimes what people do is they choose to share their time, effort, energy, and resources to help the continuation of the teachings. This isn't something you're required to do or you're expected to do or anything like that, but we call this merit. It's generosity, but it's directed towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. Because as you're learning the teachings, the only reason why you're learning them is that for 2,500 years, people have been passing the teachings down from the time of the Buddha until now. That there's been people who've been supporting the teachings all the way through for 2,500 2,500 years. And now that you're receiving these teachings, you might be receiving a certain amount of benefit from them. And now you're deciding that, okay, I would like to be sure these teachings are available for other people as well. And you might decide to help a temple or a teacher or provide various things so that other people can get access to the teachings. We use a phrase nowadays, I think it's called pay it forward. If you've ever heard this phrase, where you're experiencing something now and then you're kind of making generous offering to kind of pay it forward so that other people can benefit from what it is that you're experiencing. So you wouldn't be able to learn these teachings if it wasn't for 2,500 years of people sharing their generosity and bringing the teachings and preserving them in the world to the point where now you can sit in this land, in this building, and now you can learn these teachings. So everything you see around you is a donation. This land was once owned by a Thai person. They donated their land. Then over a course of many years, people donated resources and time and effort and energy to build these buildings. And now it's a learning center. It's a cultural center where people can come and learn. And then when I started to teach here at this room, it was run down and it wasn't very well taken care of. So students started helping me to purchase a projector and air conditioning and fans and sound system and all these different things, the carpets and things like this that you see is here from donations from students that made this environment comfortable and conducive for you to be able to learn. So that's merit, when you're helping to allow the teachings to come into the world in such a way that other people can benefit from what it is that they're learning and developing their mind. So the Buddha gives various teachings on this, and I usually go through all of these, but I'm going to kind of skip to this one right here, where it's called the way of practice. The Buddha teaches what's called the way of practice. This is like a very simple way to approach your path to enlightenment, because there's the Eightfold Path, there's the 5 precepts, there's meditation training, there's all these things that you learn on your journey to enlightenment. But the Buddha boils it down to what should you do on a day-to-day basis in order to help you get to enlightenment? What can you be doing on a daily basis to be able to get to enlightenment? And he talks about practicing generosity, improving your moral conduct, and practicing meditation. He's saying this is what you should be doing on a day-to-day basis, is looking for a way to practice generosity with others, improving your moral conduct through right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path, and then practicing meditation. And if you're doing this on a daily basis, you're actively moving closer and closer to enlightenment. So when you're practicing generosity, you can practice that with anybody and everybody. I oftentimes suggest people to start with something very simple, that if you're walking into a store and you're opening the door for yourself, you notice that there's someone behind you that is coming in, hold the door. This is generosity. This is sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources that isn't strictly required of you. But you need to be sure you're doing it without expectation. Because if you're standing there holding the door expecting a thank you, you're going to be frustrated when they don't say thank you. Right? So you need to do it without any expectation, not even a thank you. So when we go to the orphanage today, any offering that you give, it should be without any expectation of anything in return. They may or may not say thank you. I don't know. I can't remember whether they said thank you or not when we were there last time. I'm sure they did, but they may or may not, right? So when you give and you practice generosity, you just do so because you know it's enhancing your mind. This is what the Buddha shares. It's just practice generosity without any expectation of anything, but just know that it's enhancing your mind. And that's what's helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. This is called the way of practice. The Buddha has various teachings where he talks about generosity and practicing merit, but I'm going to share this one with you because I think it's very impactful. At least when I learned it, it really helped me. It's titled, If Beings Knew the Results of Giving and Sharing. Monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there were someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. What he's talking about the results of giving and sharing is enlightenment. What he's saying is if you knew how peaceful and how joyful the enlightened mental state is, and you knew that it's generosity that led you to being able to experience that, he's saying you would not eat without having shared it, even if it was your last bite and your last mouthful, because you know that the way to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state is to practice generosity. So remember the life story of the Buddha, that he was a prince. he was destined to become the king. He was a member of a royal family. He was very rich and very wealthy. And he walked away from all of that. And he entered into homelessness, and he walked down the street, and he accepted food and donations, clothing, shelter, medical care. He actually never accepted gold and silver during his life. He never accepted land or animals or any of these kinds of things. He only accepted the basic necessities to live life, like food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. So he doesn't teach generosity as a way to enrich himself because he was already rich. He walked away from that. But he knew that it was generosity that helped him get to enlightenment, because he talks about this life that he was currently in and how generosity helped him to get to enlightenment. But he also talks about his previous lives and how generosity in his previous lives helped him to be able to get to enlightenment as a Buddha in his very last life. So he knew that generosity was a key. Even if it's your last bite, even if it's your last mouthful, you would share it if there was someone to share it with. So food, oftentimes, it's somewhat challenging for people to share. This is one of the reasons why you see in Thailand, they tend to eat family style, where all the food goes in the middle and it just gets shared. You kind of take 2 or 3 spoonfuls and you just eat, and everybody kind of gradually eats together, and everybody gets a little bit of food. Because if you're living in a household that lacks resources and there's really not much food to go around, if somebody takes a heaping plate of food, then it might leave the other people without food. But if you've got 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 people sitting around some food, and everybody just takes 2 or 3 spoonfuls, they eat that 2 or 3 spoonfuls, and then they take another 2 or 3 spoonfuls and they eat that. Together, everybody gets a little bit of food. You may not be full at the end of the meal, but at least everybody got a little bit of food. So you can share your food. Like, say you're with a group of people and you open a bag of potato chips. You could send it around to your friends, and if what you get back is just 1 potato chip, okay, just eat the 1 potato chip, go get another bag, right? No big deal, right? So you can practice this on a continuous, ongoing basis, where you're practicing generosity with all the different things that you have around you, whether it's your clothes or your jewelry, your time, your effort, your financial support, whatever it is that you might decide to give, you can give to other people, and you can also give to places that are sharing the teachings of the Buddha. If you are sharing with a place that is sharing the teachings of the Buddha, you should notice that those individuals aren't enriching themselves. You should notice that if you're sharing financial support, for example, that individual is using a little bit of those resources for their food, their water, their clothing, their shelter, their medical care, that they're not living an elaborate lifestyle. What you should notice is those offerings that you give to a teacher, it should be coming back to you in terms of teachings. The Buddha talks about this mutual support between teachers and students, that the teachers are sharing teachings and the students are sharing resources to be able to help the teacher to be able to get deeper and deeper into their practice. So a teacher who's teaching the teachings, they shouldn't have an expectation of you that you should make some kind of offering to them. But if you choose to make an offering to them, the Buddha provides guidance about how to do that. He talks about that your mind should be joyful before you give. Then he says, when you're giving a gift, your mind should be calm and confident. And then he says, after you give a gift, your mind should still be joyful. What this does is it gives you time to think about any particular offering or generosity that you'd like to practice. Whereas if you just rush through it, you haven't really thought about it. So it's important to think about what you might be choosing to practice in terms of generosity, and that you can maintain your joy before and after giving. Whereas if you get to the end of your giving and you feel like, oh my goodness, I gave too much. Why did I give so much? Now I don't have what I need in order to take care of myself. But also, if you get to the end of your giving and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't give enough. I'm so selfish. Why did I give more? This is something that can happen too. You can have remorse. So the Buddha is teaching you to maintain your joy before and after giving, and while you're giving, to have calmness and confidence in your gift that you might be giving to any particular person. He talks about giving the gift of the teachings. He talks about how the best gift, the most superior gift that you could ever give, is to share the teachings. So the way that you can potentially share the teachings is by supporting places that are sharing the teachings. Right now, you might not have enough wisdom to be a teacher, or maybe you're not even interested in being a teacher. Maybe you're just interested in getting to enlightenment by yourself. Well, if we would like to have these teachings come into the world and see more and more people benefit from improved state of mind and more love and kindness and compassion in the world, we're going to need to support individuals to bring the teachings into the world. But as you're choosing to do that, that's a choice for you to make. Nobody should put their expectations on you to do that. And then as you're doing that, maintain your joy all the way through. And you should notice that anybody that you're offering gifts to, that they should be using a little bit of those resources, whether it's your time, your effort, your energy, your resources, to sustain their life. But then you should notice things coming back to the community in terms of teachings and offerings and courses and retreats and a nice environment to be able to learn in. So there's some people that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha that weren't practicing his teachings very closely. And he talks about this in his life. He talks about people who are learning with him that aren't necessarily practicing the teachings. And he encouraged you to support people who are practicing the teachings very closely. And he said, what you should see is you should see somebody's mind that is focused and concentrated, that they're actively involved in sharing the teachings, that they're sharing wisdom to be able to help you. He talks about this mutual support between monks, Brahmin, and householders. What a Brahmin is a Brahmin is a Hindu priest that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha, and they still exist today too. They're doing rites and rituals, ceremonies, and worship, and the people were convinced that you had to go to these people, you had to pay them money, and then they're going to do some ceremony, and then your life was supposed to get better. But the Buddha knew that this doesn't actually work, that you need to cultivate wisdom for your life to get better. But these Brahmin, even though they were doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, they would sometimes come to the Buddha and they would learn about the moral conduct and some of the other teachings that the Buddha would share, and then they would share those with their students. So here the Buddha is reminding his students, the monks, that Brahmin and householders are very helpful to them, that it's the Brahmin and householders, the students, that are going to provide support so that they can continue to share the teachings. So there's this mutual support that's been built in all the way from the beginning of the life of the Buddha, that he encouraged people who were planning to teach to essentially let go of worldly life and enter into a path of sharing the teachings and being very dedicated to do that. But whether somebody chooses to do that or not, it's their own personal choice. So for like me, for example, I used to be in business, I used to be in career. I gave up all of that and decided I'm going to share these teachings for the rest of my life to be able to help people to learn and practice to be able to get to enlightenment. And now I spend my time helping students through personal guidance, through courses, retreats, through making these presentations and doing all the different things that I do to be able to share the teachings. And then if people would like to support me, they can, but they're never required to. I don't have any expectation of any support from anybody. That I'm just interested in seeing you learn and practice and be able to improve the condition of your mind and the condition of your life. And then if at any point you decide you would like to share and make these teachings available for others, you can do that if you'd like to support the work that we're doing here. But just know that you can always come here without any expectation of anything in return. Whether you're joining online or you're joining here at the temple, I'll always help you. I never have as contingent of whether or not you're supporting what I'm doing or not. If my courses and my retreats had a fee, maybe $1,000 for a 1-week retreat, and that means only the people that have money would be able to get access to those teachings. That means the people that are really struggling with their life and with their career, that don't really have many resources, they wouldn't be able to get access to these teachings. So by me making them free and available to everybody at no cost, that means everybody and anybody can learn and practice these teachings. There are people who do choose to support me, and that allows me to then be able to offer these teachings for anybody free of charge, that they can download books, they can get videos and podcasts and all these other things. So if I had a price for these courses and retreats, then the people who are really struggling the most in life, that are having difficulties in their relationships and in their careers, they wouldn't be able to get access to the very teachings that they need in order to improve their life. So they would be stuck. So what the Buddha did, and what I'm choosing to do as well, is offer these teachings at no cost. But if you ever do decide to support what I'm doing, I would just like to take this moment to say thank you. If you have offered your time or your effort, your energy, or your resources in any way to me, I would like to say thank you. I appreciate your kindness, because that's what helps me to continue to be able to do what I do on a day-to-day basis. And just know that I'm here to help you regardless of anything that you might choose to offer or not offer, that I'm here to help you no matter what. So this is a bit about what merit is that it's the support of the teachings of the Buddha to be able to come into the world and for many people to be able to get access to them. And this is generosity that is producing wholesome Kamma, because now more and more people in the world can get access to these teachings. And as a collective society, we can all become more peaceful, more kind, and a more loving society. So do you guys have any questions on this topic? Yes, ma'am.
I met somebody, and he was Indian, and he was born in a Brahmin family, and he wanted to stay in Thailand, but he needed to work, and nobody would hire him because he was a Brahmin. How would that relate? Because he wasn't sharing teachings, he was just looking for work.
So in Thailand, the way that you get jobs is through your relationships. They typically don't hire people just off the street. If you're a business owner, you're going to make very wise decisions about who you involve in your company, because the wisdom or the lack thereof in your employee's mind is going to determine how successful your business is. So if you hire someone off the street, you don't necessarily know how much craving, anger, or ignorance they have in their mind. So typically what business owners do is they hire people that they know, people that are friends or family, or friends and family of their employees. So usually to get a job in Thai society, you need to really be part of Thai society for a long time so that people know about you and they are comfortable with you. So like this classroom here, I was teaching at this temple for 3 years before they ever offered me this classroom to teach. And I didn't know that they were going to offer this classroom. I just started teaching here because I was invited to come. And I used to teach in the main building. But after about 3 years, and they saw my dedication and my determination, and the class sizes were getting bigger and bigger, they said, hey, we have this classroom for you. Why don't you teach here? But they're not going to do that on day one, or even in month one, or year one. It was 3 years of them observing this person to decide whether or not they would like to include me in what they're doing here. So this is the same way with business owners, is because they understand the natural law of Kamma so well, and they know that any decision their employees make is going to affect them in their business, they're very slow and very methodical about who they hire into their company, because they know that they're hiring an individual that is potentially has craving, anger, and ignorance, and that's going to affect their success of their business, which means it affects the success of their family and their ability to eat and everything else. Yes, sir.
So for the generosity, because I had previously different thoughts and now I have different. The act of generosity to be valid, what are the conditions? Because I think like if you're sharing the chips, or if you are leaving just the tips in a restaurant, it's not really like the act of the generosity. It's just you can sometimes insult someone with your thinking that you're doing act of generosity. I guess like you say, some organizations or some person who is open for donations, or obviously if someone is asking for the help, that is a valid act for the generosity. Or what are the conditions when we can consider, yes, we did a generous act like orphanage or...
Yeah. So what generosity is it's the action and the readiness and the willingness to give more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. That's what generosity is. What you described about insulting somebody, you can't actually insult somebody. If somebody feels insulted because you left a $1 tip, then this is because they have an expectation of what they want. They're having a craving, a desire, now they feel insulted. Where, hey, that might be all I could actually tip. Like when I went to America 2 years ago, I'm living on Thai baht. I don't really have much money. Where when I lived in America before, I had lots of money. I could tip very handsomely. But now when I went back there, I couldn't really tip. I just had very little small basic tips for people. And if they got angry because of that, then that's on them. I'm just practicing pure generosity. But if they're having a craving or expectation and they get insulted, that's on them. Because for me, it's either give them nothing or give them this $1 or $3 or something like that. So you need to be able to see what generosity is. It's just giving and sharing time, effort, energy, and resources more than strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And then when you practice that, that's helping your mind. What the Buddha says in terms of merit and producing merit, to practice generosity in relationship to his teachings, he shares that you should support people who are either free of craving, anger, and ignorance, which means they're enlightened, or that you should practice generosity towards people who are practicing to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and anger, hatred, or will, and that ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So like if you saw a monk standing on the street corner smoking a cigarette, hitting a dog, and gambling, they're not practicing the teachings very closely. It's unwise for you to support that because your money is going straight to that, right? Where the Buddha was encouraging you, hey, if there's this person that's sharing the teachings and they're developing their practice very closely and trying to help other people to be able to understand these teachings, that's the person to support. Because if you can imagine, by the time a Buddha dies, there's just thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are learning and practicing his teachings, that not all of them are practicing them very closely. So he was providing guidance about who to support and who to ensure that your generosity is producing the most merit, where you're supporting people who are actually sharing the teachings and trying to help people get to enlightenment. Let's see. Still have people hanging out online. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So it's 12:36. This is perfect because it gives us almost an hour for lunch. We're going to have a van here at 1:30 that's coming to pick us up. And if you guys would like to go out and have lunch and do whatever you like to do, at 1:30, if you could be here even prior to 1:30, because we're going to get in the van and we're going to go to a market and we're going to buy wholesale food, like 10 kilos of potatoes and 50 kilos of rice and things like this. If you would like to contribute money to this, there's already been some students that gave me money. I'm just creating a pot. I'm going to put 3,000 baht into this pot from the money that's given to me from donations to be able to support this. If you guys would like to give money, you're welcome to do that. If not, you can still go to the orphanage without practicing generosity. That's fine. Just going there can be very educational for you. But if you'd like to contribute to this, if we could maybe have a bowl, maybe this white bowl right here, we could just put a whole bunch of money in there. And then that way we'll know when we leave how much money we've got. And then we can figure out how much to purchase. I usually go with at least about 8,000 baht. What I noticed one time is I went there by myself and I purchased enough food that they could eat for 2 weeks with 8,000 baht. And the whole entire orphanage could eat for 2 weeks. So anything above that would just be additional time. And I'm not saying we have to get 8,000 baht together, but I thought I would kick it off with putting 3,000 baht in there. And there were some students yesterday who gave me some money too. So if you guys would like to contribute to that, you can. If you need to go to the ATM and come back, that's fine too. But prior to us getting to the market, if you've put some money into the pot, then we can kind of purchase things as a group. We can purchase these large quantities of things, because I'm going to take you guys to a wholesale market where we can get really low prices and lots of quantity, rather than going to like a retail center. We're going to go to a wholesale market, which will actually be fun in and of itself, because these farmers basically are selling cabbage off the back of their truck, and you can see, what the wholesale market is like. This is where all the restaurants go to buy their food. So we can get really low prices and very good quality. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and practice these teachings, and enjoy your lunch. And I'll see you back here at 1:30. We'll be leaving out. Okay. So thank you so much. Sawadee Kap. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.